Hello, everyone. This is Nicholas Capman. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. Just a little bit about the FDA group before we jump into our discussion for today. We help life science companies in the areas of quality assurance, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, commissioning, qualification, and validation, as well as pharmacovigilance. We offer three different engagement models, which are consulting, staff augmentation, and full-time employer recruitment. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to thefdagroup.com to check us out and get in touch. So today I am speaking with Marcia Baroni. Hello, Marcia. How are you?
Good morning, Nick. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
Excellent. So before we jump into the topic for today, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Marcia Baroni. I am a microbiologist by training. I have been working in the pharma industry, pharma, biopharma, for about 27 years now. And those 27 years have been in quality. Almost every different role within the quality organization in South America, North America, Europe, and Asia.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So what are we talking about today?
So today, what we're talking about is looking at how the life science industries can shift the perception of quality from the traditional view of quality, which is a very reactive cost quality center, um, to a view that's more prospective. It's a more strategic view of really seeing quality as a value driver for the organization.
Okay. So why don't we start with the baseline? What is the traditional perspective of quality that people are familiar with?
So I think most times when you're talking about quality, people see quality as a cost center. There's a lot of different organizations and different papers that talk about the cost of quality, how you have good quality costs, how you have bad quality costs. But really, it's always framing quality as a cost. And as with any business, every cost needs to be controlled. So the focus is always on controlling the cost of quality.
Hmm. Okay. So what is, maybe you can expand on that. What does the cost of quality entail? What is, and maybe we can even stick with the traditional perspective. What are uh, traditional positive aspects of the cost of quality and maybe some of the negative or perceptive negative costs of quality?
Yeah, so cost of quality, like I said before, we have your traditional bad quality costs and your good quality costs. Your bad quality costs are the costs that you have when something goes wrong. It means you can have a lower yield, you can have scrap, you can have a recall, you can have a product defect. Um, when you have deviations, the cost of writing deviations, those are all the costs of bad quality. You also have the costs of good quality. How much does it cost to test your product before you release? How much does it cost to put an additional control into your manufacturing process? How much does it cost to hire an additional person to be doing oversight activities? Those are all of the things that you do upfront to ensure good quality. So those are the costs of good quality.
Okay. Well, I think we've all seen the meme that has gone through LinkedIn where it has two mason jars and it shows the mason jar before an FDA warning letter and there's a few coins, and then it shows the mason jar after an FDA warning letter and it's full, right? So let's jump into the good quality costs because the bad quality costs need to take place. It's not optional. The good quality costs, I see it as kind of being thought of in a couple different ways. One is we want to invest in that center so as to mitigate the opportunities for bad cost. I also see it as I assume that I can control those costs as much as possible and eat my cake too, right? And not have any of those poor costs. So can you comment on that and tell me what do traditional discussions around this sound like? And that might be what did it sound like before and what does it sound like now?
I think the conversation around the good cost of quality has not changed very much over the course of the industry, but how it's being had at each organization depends on where on the organizational life cycle. As you were talking about the memes with the two mason jars, after you've been through a warning letter and you got out of it, the conversation around investing in the good cost of quality is really easy. The
Mhm.
pain is so recent and so real. It's very easy for people to come around and see the value and see the value proposition in being able to say, let's invest in good quality. Let's invest in an additional control. Let's invest, in a tighter specification. Let's invest in a higher quality material. When it's been a very long time since you've had one of those major significant company-wide issues, it gets harder and harder to have that conversation because now you're saying, well, let's invest in this additional control, but do we really need it? It has been going so well. We haven't had any issues. So it really, the further you get away from a really significant event, that pendulum starts swinging back. And
Mhm.
the harder it is to have those conversations around maintaining that investment in good quality. You can always say, yeah, but remember, if this goes wrong, it doesn't go well, we have a finding, it could cost us so much more. There's all of these different estimates out there of how much a warning letter can cost a company, how much a 483 observation can cost a company, but it doesn't feel as real to the organization when
Mhm.
they've been through a period of significant stability.
Mhm.
So I think because it is still viewed as a cost, the risk aversion is to say we are good enough, we don't need to invest in that cost.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, Marcia, I know you're Brazilian and I am in Brazil currently, and that just reminded me of a conversation I had with my sister-in-law. She got into a car accident last year, and in Brazil, you're not required to have car insurance. And I asked her if she had car insurance, and she said no. And I said, "Do you have car insurance now?" And she said yes. So I guess the cost of quality can be looked at as a insurance policy. Now let's speak to that. Um, as the CEO of the FDA group, I have to purchase different insurance policies for the business, and I am provided with different options, and it's up to me to determine what is that optimal point. Because while I need to take the advice of the agent, I also have to, come up with my own analysis and determine whether or not I agree with that agent. So, for listeners to this podcast that have not gone through a warning letter, because I think to your point, if you've gone through that, you don't need to hear this, you understand. But for those that haven't, especially if they've been in business for several years, and they're getting approached by their quality units about investments in quality, how do they know? How do they determine when a recommendation is prudent and they should take advantage of that? And when should they feel like it's acceptable to say no?
And I think the insurance example is a great one because it's the exact same type of thinking that executives are having. They are looking at what is their risk appetite. They are looking at, if an accident did happen, how much time, how much money do we think we would need to invest in it? And then looking at that versus the cost, is there a return on investment? Does it make sense? Is it insurance that we want? But I think all of this is looking at quality as a cost. If you start looking at quality as a value driver, you're not doing the same math anymore. The math that you're doing is not looking to see, is this an insurance policy that I need to buy? Now you're looking at, is this an investment I want to make for future yields? It's not about eliminating and being reactive to an issue that could have happened. It's looking at, how do I want to position myself? How do I want to invest in my future? So instead of buying a insurance policy that is talking about it will pay out in case of, now you're looking at an insurance policy that has a term that is going to have a payout at the end regardless. And it may also have a clause in there that is going to save you in the case of an accident.
Oh,
So it's really changing how you do the math on this, because you're not looking at it just as an insurance policy. Now you're evaluating it as an investment.
okay. So there's value toward these investments as opposed to just mitigating costs were something to happen.
Absolutely.
Can you expand on some of the value that can be realized?
Um, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can look at the value that you can realize. So, one of the things within the pharmaceutical industry is reputation, reputation of your brand. That is one of the things that can make or break a company. And investment in quality for the pharmaceutical industry is always going to be an investment in the value and the perception of your brand. How you treat, I think everyone understands that an issue can always happen, but how you treat transparency, how you treat your approach, how you treat the investments that you're making. So the value of your brand is one. The value of your employees is another one. I think one of the biggest things that companies sometimes fail to realize is that investing in quality and investing in a quality culture can radically change the outcomes within the organization.
Hmm.
When you have an organization where you have invested in developing a deep quality culture, you don't have a quality of department of 50 people. Every employee in your organization becomes your quality department, and you're much more likely to detect issues on the ground floor versus having to wait until the issue materializes to a point where it's so pervasive and now you're having failures and now you're having issues. One of the clear examples for me when I was working on this 10, 20 years back, there's a great case of a recall that had to happen nationwide across the US on an over-the-counter medication. And this medication was making people sick. They were testing the product was perfectly fine, nothing had happened during manufacturing. And after a long time, they were able to understand that the issue was the pallets. So the pallets that the product was being shipped in and was being stored in were treated with a chemical. That chemical was seeping through the cardboard, it was seeping into the cartons, it was seeping into the plastic pill
Wow,
bottle and into the pills and
that's
making
crazy.
people sick.
Wow.
So it wasn't anything that they had done wrong during manufacturing. It wasn't something wrong with their products. It was a change in their wooden pallets. Now, they knew about this. They
Oh,
didn't realize they knew about this. But the moment their vendor switched their pallets, manufacturing operators in the warehouse said, "These smell funny." They saw the change, but either they didn't raise it up or it was dismissed. They could have caught it at the beginning.
Wow.
No one would have gotten sick. They wouldn't have to do nationwide recall. They wouldn't have lost $600 million because of this. If they had paid attention to the fact that as these pallets were coming in, people were saying, these smell funny. They didn't used to smell like this.
Hmm.
And that's where what a quality culture mindset gets you. It gets you that engagement from people, and it gets people questioning changes. It gets people looking at what's going on around them and understanding the potential impact of product.
Hmm. Now, I don't want to deviate from our primary focus of this conversation, but I do want to touch on that point about a quality culture. Uh,
Mm.
in brief, uh, what does a quality culture look like? What is the requirement of an organization in terms of investment and time if they're going from a traditional place not having quality culture to fully implementing a quality culture? And then what are some of the benefits that you can reap from that?
So, what a quality culture looks like, and I don't think it's deviating too much from the topic because honestly, when you start seeing quality as a value driver, one of the big things you need to invest on to realize that value and to have that strategic vision is to invest in a quality culture within your organization. It really is having an organization where everyone feels responsible and everyone feels accountable and able to speak to the quality of the activities that they're executing. It means that you don't have a quality organization who is there to police everything else that's being done. You have a quality organization that is there to partner with every single other function at looking at ways to improve efficiency, looking at ways to address uh, potential concerns and issues, to manage changes, to ensure that we remain compliant, but really looking to partner with, not oversee, not control, not police,
Mhm.
but really someone who is there to help you in your journey. And that responsibility is everyone's responsibility.
Yeah. I can use a couple different analogies using other business units. So I think someone that's not in quality but is, in executive leadership that is listening to this and trying to determine whether or not what we're saying is worth listening to is another aspect is everyone is a salesperson, right? And so it's not just the salespeople's responsibility, it's the people delivering the service or shipping the product or whatever the case may be. Everybody's in sales. So I think a lot of people that are trying to determine whether or not what we're saying makes sense can connect with that aspect. The other thing is you mentioned that they're not quality is not used to be policing. It's not there to police, it's there to partner. Another business unit that I think is similar is HR. HR feels oftentimes like it's there to police, but really it's there to assist. Am I going about my interview process correctly? Have I been handling those aspects of employment that I'm responsible for in a manner that is optimal, effective, and appropriate? Would you agree with that?
I agree. And I think just as in the case of sales and HR, it isn't something that is one way. It needs to go both ways. So if quality says they don't want to be the one to police, they want to be the one to partner. But if when they're brought into the conversation, if when we're having those discussions, the quality representatives reaction is to say, yes, you can do that. No, you can't do that. That's not partnering. That's giving me an answer that I can get from Copilot. What I want is that engagement. Okay, let me understand. What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? What's the ultimate objective? Let's work on finding a solution that is going to work really great for you. It's going to be compliant and it's going to drive value. So it takes both parties to get to that state.
I'm a man of a million analogies, and another one that popped in my head is when having discussions with my financial advisor. I don't go and ask that individual, what should I do? I'm quickly met with, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What's the short term, the long term, and having a real holistic understanding of that particular situation is what's going to allow for both sides of the conversation to come to the same understanding.
Exactly. And I think the same way with a financial advisor, if you have that quality culture, if you have that engagement where you have this collaboration, you're always going to get much better outcomes. And what you need to invest as a company in order to make this happen, in order to get you there, really is a lot of work on behaviors and expectations. It takes time. You don't turn this on a dime. It needs to be modeled from the top down because people will mimic behaviors that they see. And you need to make sure that you are encouraging the right behaviors, not just by what you're saying, but also by what you're doing. How are you tying your rewards, your merit, your performance management to encourage the behaviors that you want to see?
Yeah. Words are spoken, actions are screamed. So, I have a question, a couple questions that are separate. First, for those individuals that are in a traditional organization where it's looked at as a cost center, and they want to just open up that conversation to their leadership team, but get the desired reaction, which is open to that conversation. What advice would you give them in order to get their leadership team to listen? That's the first question. And if you can, remember my second question, which is if I'm an executive leader and I'm listening to this conversation and I've bought in, right? I've done it the traditional way, but now I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm saying that's actually ringing a bell and
Mhm.
I'm believing in it. What's the first step they should take?
Okay. So I think in order to start having that conversation with an executive leadership team, what I have often found is that denial is the first step. Well, we have an organization that is not treating it as a cost of quality. And I think there's a few things that you can look for within your organization to kind of do a litmus test and say, really, are we really treating it as a value driver, or do we think we are, but we're really treating it as a cost center? And you look at things like your board of directors. Is quality an agenda topic outside of you had an issue? Is quality being discussed at executive level meetings? What level is the senior quality person? Is it someone who is sitting at that table, or is it someone who reports to the head of manufacturing that is sitting at that table? How often do you discuss it? So I think these are the things. If quality is only rising up during strategic decisions
Mm,
and during long range planning, when you're talking about we've had an issue or we're trying to prevent having an issue again, you really haven't moved outside of the cost of quality
mm,
discussion. You're stuck in that retroactive. And I
mm,
think a lot of times making people realize that that's what we've been doing. We didn't think that's what we were doing, but that's what we've been doing. And that's what we're telegraphing to the rest of the organization. If I never ask quality to come in and talk about a topic outside of an issue,
mm.
they know their job is to prevent issues. And that's that's their job to be able to make sure it doesn't happen. So I think getting the organization to see is the first step. Once you've bought into that idea,
Well,
to your
yeah, let me
Mhm.
pause you there because I just wanted to add a little bit. So I've seen both. And one of the things that I've noticed, again, to try to use an analogy is you almost don't even know quality is being inserted into the conversation during a culture of quality because it's so woven into. It's always referenced to and referred to in the periphery of the primary conversation. So it's almost omnipotent.
And I agree with you. And I think the other thing is it's not coming from the head of quality.
Right, right, exactly.
It's the head of manufacturing,
Yep.
it's the head of supply chain that are talking about the importance of quality in these processes. That's when you know that you've really hit, that level of maturity and culture that you want within your organization.
Yep. Okay, that's great. So now, please continue with the executive that's listening and bought in.
I think once you have an executive that's listening, they bought in, they really want to invest in this. The first thing is you need to look at what is the actual state of your organization. How far away are you
Mm.
from being able to reach that state? And depending on how far you are, it's going to dictate how you're going to approach this. If you have an organization that has been, very, very, stuck in this is manufacturing's role, this is quality role, you don't get involved unless I come to you with a problem, you're going to have to start from the basics. You're going to have to start from the beginning and build it from the ground up. If you have an organization where you have a good working relationship between the different functions, you're now going to start looking at changing how you're signaling the role of quality within the organization. And that might be starting to look at what kind of topic items you're speaking in, how you're bringing it into the conversation, looking at rewarding some of those behaviors, investing in people's ability to speak up, investing in people's ability to raise questions, raise concerns, raise ideas, and, and getting that looking into that more prospective view of the organization. How do we evaluate change? How do we incorporate where the industry is going and try to bring that into our organization?
Yeah, so I heard a couple different things. One thing I heard is the importance of psychological safety, and the other thing I heard is having a uh, utilitarian scorecard. In terms of psychological safety, that goes beyond just being able to speak up without having fear of your job. It's also having the safety to know that when I bring up something that I believe is worthwhile, not having a person be dismissive because it's very demoralizing. And then when it comes to a scorecard, you mentioned, where are, what is in the very beginning, what's the current state, where are we looking to go to? So you have to, there's no control without measurement. So being able to uh, document the current state, the future state, and then coming up with a plan that's going to allow over a certain period of time achieving that new state.
I think exactly right. I think the psychological safety is a big piece of it. It's not only, as you said, feeling safe to be able to speak up, but it's also feeling that when you do speak up, it's valued.
Mm.
No one is expecting that everything that they say end in a change, but they want to know that people listen. And maybe it wasn't a good idea because I didn't consider ABC. Or maybe it's a great idea, but we don't have the infrastructure to be able to do it.
Mm.
Maybe it's a great idea, but we can't do it now, but we're really going to be looking at doing it in the future. That feedback loop and that experience for the employee that brings it up
Mm.
is key to be able to make that something that's sustainable and something that's going to drive change rather than just being the flavor of the month of what is the corporate initiative that we're doing this year.
Yeah.
So I think that feedback loop and that psychological safety is key. And then you have to measure. But as you were saying, change doesn't happen without you measuring it, but you have to make sure that you're measuring the right thing because you can drive the wrong behavior. Not meaning to, but you can drive the wrong behavior. If you are looking at decreasing deviations and you start measuring how many deviations do I have, and now I have a goal for the site that if they have above a certain number of deviations, then they're not meeting the goal. And if they're not meeting the goal, it's going to penalize their performance rating. It's going to penalize their bonuses. People will stop reporting deviations. That's not what you are driving. What you can look at instead is, are we reducing repeat deviations? Are we reduced? So when we fixed an issue, is it staying fixed or
Yeah.
are we having recurrence? And make something positive of, if I'm able to eliminate the recurrence of a certain activity, then there's a reward associated with that rather than penalizing it for a problem happening.
Yeah.
So as you build the metrics, building the metrics and really looking at making sure they're going to drive the behavior that you want. And I have never seen anyone get 100% of them right in the beginning, and you might have to change. You might have to realize, you know what? We had the best of intentions when we implemented this. We didn't expect that it was going to go off on this tangent. And now we need to go back. We need to relook at how we're messaging that. We need to maybe tweak the metric a little bit.
Yeah. I want to touch on three things. I want to talk about partnering. I want to talk about Lencioni's pyramid, and I want to talk about the scorecard again. So, in a conversation where somebody is feeling psychologically safe and bringing something up, I would say if that conversation is looked at as a partnership, more often than not, both sides are actually going to come to the same conclusion, right? So I think this might be beneficial. Let's say it's not for the purposes of this example. The other individual will be probing and asking questions, and at some point, both of those crosses are going to intersect at the same point, which is, whatever, a yes or a no. Now,
Mhm.
in the circumstance where there isn't agreement, that's still okay. Lencioni's pyramid says first you need to trust each other, then you have to be able to have conflict, right? Which is engaging in these difficult conversations. Then you have the third one, which is to commit. We have to commit to what we're doing, whether it was your idea or it wasn't your idea or you got what you wanted. And then you have to hold all of those individuals accountable in order to reach the top of the pyramid, which is those results. Now, to go back to the scorecard, which you referenced, I would say to those individuals that are engaging in this process for the first time, that's arguably, in my experience, the most difficult. And I'll tell you why. What do I need to measure? Is it three measurables? Is it 300 measurables? Three is not enough, and 300 is way too many. So how many things am I measuring? Um, so that I have a pulse on the quality culture or the quality of the organization. How difficult is it to access that information? Is it easy to get access or is it very difficult to access? How accurate is the information that I'm reporting? And then most importantly is, am I reporting this information for the sake of reporting, or is it giving me information that I can use in order to make decisions? That is very difficult. Now, it can take a couple years to get that thing right. Um, Here's the other problem, which shouldn't scare anybody away, but it's a fact, is that scorecard's going to change over time. So some metrics that you used to measure in the beginning might not be adding value, in which case you now have to incorporate other metrics as your company begins to scale.
I think it's absolutely true. The issue with the metrics is one, finding the right metric,
Right.
but then also realizing that it's not going to be the same metric all the time. As you progress, as you evolve, that metric is going to evolve. Something that you start measuring at the beginning may not be what you need to measure a year down the road, because now that issue that you were focusing on has been resolved. You need to move on to the next issue. You need to go a level lower. It's like when you're trying to learn a new skill or you've taken up a new sport. If I take up cycling, my first measure is, can I stay on the bike and not fall over? Once I can do that, continuing to track how many times I fell over becomes meaningless. There's no use to tracking that. I need to track now, was I able to go 5 miles or 10 miles or 15 miles? It's going to change as my skill level progresses. So, along the quality as a value driver discussion, as the organization grows, as the organization progresses, you're going to have to continue to shift the focus of those metrics and which metrics you're going to look at.
Yeah. Um, this may be seen as a non sequitur, but it's something that I want to transition into, which is for those audience members that are buying into this conversation. I'm sure one of the things they're asking themselves is, what are some of the obstacles and what are some of the challenges that I can expect to face in addition to the scorecard as I go down this journey?
I think some of the obstacles that you might be facing is obviously, for sure, cost. While, yes, we say it is an investment, it is a value driver, we don't have unlimited money. So we do need to understand what can we afford to do now in terms of an investment, not in terms of an insurance, but in terms of an investment. How much can I afford to invest for the future? And that may change year to year. One of the other things is that while the quality culture, the quality conversation is great, and it's always going to build a more sustainable model. It's going to build stability. It's very hard to implement in the middle of a crisis. So if you are currently drowning in a warning letter, investing in a quality culture right now, it's just not going to work. You need to not drown. Once you get out of the water and you're no longer drowning, now you can go and invest on swimming lessons. But you can't do that while you're drowning. So you have to have a certain level of stability. It doesn't mean that you can't make small steps in the right direction, but really to look at a concerted effort, you have to be in a stable situation.
Mhm.
And you have to have that buy-in from not just one executive member. Like the discussion that you were saying, two people need to come to an agreement. They have to trust each other. Maybe not everyone agrees on the decision or has the same opinion, but they all need to come around and support it. If you have members of executive management that are undermining the effort because they don't believe it's the way to go, you're not going to get very far.
Well, and that's deviating from Lencioni's pyramid. So
Absolutely.
even if you didn't agree during the conflict, you have to be able to move up the level, which is commitment.
Commitment, and you have to commit to supporting the implementation.
Yeah, exactly. Um, we all love stories. What is a story that you can think of that exemplifies what we're talking about today?
So I think one of the stories I would say, I came into this organization and they had a quality culture issue. Now, their quality metrics were good. So all of the things they were measuring was green, but they had a culture issue. And every time the the senior manager of quality would come into my office, I was the site head of quality, would come into my office to talk about something that was going on. Oh, this happened today. Um, there was an issue. Manufacturing did this, manufacturing did that. The question would be, well, have you talked to them? Well, no. Why haven't you talked to them? Well, it's no use talking to them. They're not going to listen to me. We need to talk to them. And he would always come into the office, sit down at the chair, and be like this, like arms crossed in front of him, leaning back, like he was almost ready to defend himself. And it took probably 3 to 4 months before he came into my office and he wanted to talk about something where he sat down and he was relaxed. He wasn't expecting conflict anymore. And it takes a long time to get to that stage. But once you get to that stage, you see the difference so clearly. Now people are no longer talking about the problem that they're having. They're talking about how are we working together to solve the problem that we're having. And this is what that investment gets you. It gets you into a position where you can focus on the solution and you can focus on being proactive rather than always focusing what's the latest fire that I need to put out.
Hmm. Yeah, I love it. Um, I found this conversation really useful. I think the audience has found it really useful. Um, as we close, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I think I would like to leave the audience with the fact that investing in quality isn't just something that sounds nice on a slogan and sounds nice on a poster. It's something that it takes a lot of time, it takes investment, it takes dedication, but it can bring about so many benefits to the organization in terms of sustainability, in terms of performance, in terms of profits. Yes, I'm not naive. Quality is always a cost. And like every cost in the organization, you have to be able to manage it. But I think we really need to start looking at it as an investment, not as an insurance policy.
One other thing I wanted to just ask before we close is, are there any resources, books, organizations that for somebody that's buying into this conversation, you can point them to as they begin their journey?
I think there's a lot of people out there. I mean, Gardner has a lot of work on the cost of quality. You look at organizations like Pathway, like PDA, they have a ton of documents and resources available on quality maturity, quality culture. The FDA has resources on quality maturity and quality culture. I think the resources, and if you look to any consulting firm, they will be able to help you on your journey towards a value driver proposition.
Yeah, and to that point, I would say on the FDA Group's website at the top, there's a an option called resources. If you go down there, there's a whole bunch of information in all different forms. We've got podcasts, white papers, we've got the insider newsletter. There's just a ton of information there, so definitely use that as a resource. And it's other than the insider newsletter, which is a subscription-based product, which does have a free option. Everything else that's under there is free. So, Marcia, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for your insight. And for everybody that's listening, as always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. If you have not already, subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect about project or resource needs, head over to thefdagroup.com to get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.